U.S. officials seem to have been caught off guard by President Duterte's announcement that the Philippines would separate from the U.S. U.S. Assistant Secretary of State will be traveling to Manila this weekend on a pre-planned trip. During that visit, he hopes to meet with his counterparts to better assess the situation.
We are going to be seeking an explanation of exactly what the president meant when he talked about separation from the U.S. It's not clear to us exactly what that means in all its ramifications.
The U.S. has military treaties with the Philippines dating back to the 1950s, including the more recent Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement that was signed about 2 years ago. That agreement allows for U.S. troops and equipment to access Filipino military bases. The U.S. wants to know if those treaties may be in jeopardy and if the Philippines might expel U.S. troops from the country.
America has grown weak, and so weak that the Philippines have broken with decades of pro-American foreign policy to instead leave for the orbit of China and Russia. You saw that yesterday. The hatred. I mean, why is Obama campaigning? He ought to be out working. He ought to be out. Right? I mean, I'm going to send the congressman back to Washington with that message, but we'll send the real message on November 8th, right? We'll send the real message on November. But every time I look at him, he's campaigning. I mean, here you see the Philippines, the heads of the Philippines, they're so angry. He leaves for China. He's now negotiating with China. We've been in the Philippines practically for forever. A very important strategic ally. And what happens? China and Russia are probably going to take it. And I see him out there campaigning for crooked Hillary. Come on. Come on. Give me a break. Strength will also require growth. Right now, our economy isn't growing at all. We had only around a 1% growth last quarter. GDP, a disaster. You know, when China has 1%, it's over. They don't have 1%. They have 7%. That's considered terrible. India has 8%. That's considered bad for them. They don't like it. We have 1% and everything's supposed to be fine. But we're going down. If Hillary gets in, she's going to raise your taxes, and the 1% is going to be negative, and that's going to be almost unheard of. But that's going to happen. I made a lot of predictions. If that happens, and if she gets in, you're going to have such negative growth. You will have problems like you've never had before, and our companies and our jobs will flee, believe me.
Are you serious? Are you serious? Get some coffee and calm down. But can anybody calm down the Philippines? How could President Obama get so far off track with the nation of the Philippines when we had such a great working relationship? We've had a tremendous relationship with the Philippines for I mean, what, 50 years? I mean, longer. Look, are you serious? We saved the Philippines. Well, special weapons and tactics and SWAT team members prepared tear gas to disperse various activists and the people there. I mean, the locals. Groups protesting against this continuing presence of the U.S. troops in the Philippines in front of the U.S. Embassy in Manila. Of course, folks, Romeo Ranco is reporting out of Reuters that the Philippine police used tear gas to disperse about 1,000 anti-U.S. protesters outside the U.S. Embassy in Manila on Wednesday. And as television news footage showed, a patrol van, which had come under attack, drove over top 3 demonstrators, ran them over. The rally came as President Rodrigo Duterte visits Beijing, China, to strengthen relations with the world's second largest economy and deteriorating ties with former United States. He and President Obama have been calling each other names. I mean, are you serious? How does this keep happening with Obama? He gets in a name-calling situation with Russia's President Vladimir Putin. He gets and gets into this situation now with the Philippine president, constantly at odds. I remember when the President Obama was running in 2008, the big deal was that he was all about hope and change, that he was going to change America's perspective, America's perception in the world. Man, we've got more enemies now than ever, and even our friends don't like us. And oh, by the way, look how he's treated Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. I mean, if this is how you treat your friends, are you serious? You end up with a lot of enemies. It's a mess. And do you think it will be better under Hillary Clinton? Anyway, the protesters are calling for removal of U.S. troops out of the southern islands there in the Philippines. There was absolutely no justification for the police violence. This was a peaceful protest that just went bad. Even the president avowed an independent foreign policy. Philippine police forces still act as running dogs of the U.S., he said. They're going to try to force the United States out of the Philippines, and they're going to partner up with new partners, and apparently they may be China. And they may wish one day not that they had not done this. And I wish that we had better diplomatic relationships. But our diplomats, John F. Kerry, Samantha Power, they've done nothing, but they're causing World War III if we're not careful. I mean, we can't get this administration out of here fast enough. I've been telling you guys this. And I said, the last 6 months of the Obama presidency may be the dangerous and the most tragic of all. And who are we going to get to take? Are we going to get a third term and a fourth term and then Chelsea? I can't deal with it. I don't know if I can deal with it much more. I don't know if I can deal with it much more. Give your life to Jesus Christ, folks, and you better hurry because we're running out of time. Don't miss today's live broadcast. Starts at 12 noon Eastern. We got to talk about what's going on in Europe with Russia, the United States, Syria, Assad, everything taking place, nuclear threats, Turkey getting in the mix. We got to talk about Planet X because the heavens are shaking. The stars are breaking. The devil's back is aching. The earth is quaking. Are you serious? Steve Olson will be our guest today at 12 noon Eastern at my website at www.paulbegleyprophecy.com. That's www.paulbegleyprophecy.com. Chaos in the world. Chaos in the world. And we can't find the answer. And the answer is Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is truly the only hope. Do you know him as your Savior? Time's running out.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Good. You know, there's been something in the news, and we brought it up in the report over the weekend about what's going on with China and the Philippines. And the new president, relatively new president, Duterte, has been rather bold in his language, and it's all anti-American. And of course, he's been and has been, and to some degree still dependent on America for some reason. But he's pivoting to China. He wants to go to China. Now, already we know that the United States have had a pivot. Obama's been very clear. I'm pivoting to Asia. I guess he's getting tired of the Middle East and all this. But he wants to pivot and concentrate and sends naval vessels over there to the South China Sea as if we're going to have a great World War II naval battle, going on. But we need to talk a little bit about the significance of this. It can't be ignored. In one sense, I don't think this is about ready to break out into a naval war or a lot of troops moving, but it could be very, very serious for international relations. We have a treaty, of course, with the Philippines and so many other countries, bilateral, anything goes wrong, we're obligated. The treaties obligate our kids, and they probably, like usual, wouldn't declare war or anything. Would be involved. But we've already sent naval vessels over there, and that's naval vessels and aircraft carriers. It's sort of World War II. You know, a submarine can take care of these vessels in no time. So it's significant, but. I want to talk a little bit about what really is going on here. Why did this just happen, or has it been smoldering there and we just all of a sudden had the president of the Philippines, go to China, and he has been in our face, so to speak, and in the president's face. He has said very vulgar and unkind things to our president. He has no right to insult our president. We have a right to do that, but he's not allowed to do it.
Yeah, he's a pretty colorful figure, that's for sure. He certainly, in some ways, doesn't appear ready for prime time, certainly with his language. But the issue is deeper, and it's a long-standing issue. As with the U.S. has had a long relationship with the Philippines, as you know, since 1898 and before, probably. And the issue now is China, and there are disputed islands. As a matter of fact, we have a graphic that we could put up that shows really what a small neighborhood this is, and what significant players, geographically at least, the Philippines and Vietnam are in the scene. You can see China up there. You can see the Scarborough Shoal in the north part of the Philippines is where there's some disputed fishing territory between the Philippines and China, and that's been really the source of their aggravation with each other over this time.
And one thing is, it's not about navigation. China has not threatened, probably won't threaten, because trillions and trillions of dollars of goods and services, go back and forth through the South China Sea. So that hasn't been the issue. It's been these small islands, these dredging of producing new islands, the fishing grounds, and who settles these disputes. And it probably has some tricky international questions raised, but it's just been recent that this has been brought up, and the big question is what will the United States do? The one thing that concerns me a little bit is that I have a saying about foreign policy that, well, we have two foreign policies. If these people from these other countries, their dictators or their leaders, do what we tell them, we give them money. But if they don't, we call in the CIA. And even though since 1992 the major bases have been closed in the Philippines, we still have troops in there. And let me tell you, it's the troops that go in and out of the Philippines are anti-terrorist groups, you know. And they also, believe me, they have CIA agents there. So maybe in reality it's sad that these countries should be thinking about where are the CIA agents and what could happen. It's not unusual throughout history for us to become annoyed. My guess is, though, that's not likely to happen. I wouldn't predict that our CIA is going to get involved and leadership is going to change. But I wouldn't be surprised if more money transfers, money from the American taxpayers who don't have it, and sent over to dictators over there that won't help the poor people in the Philippines. That is one of the things that could happen from this squabble that's going on.
Yeah, and the whole origin is just, it sort of blew up a few days ago when Duterte was in China, and he announced pretty vociferously that I've had it with the U.S., I'm pivoting toward China, I want to trade with you more, I want economic ties. And he had to walk back the statement a few days later when he got home. And he said, I'm not talking about severing diplomatic relations, but he made a good point. I'm talking about us being so caught up in U.S. foreign policy to our disadvantage. I'm paraphrasing what he said, but he makes a good point. The U.S. interest in the South China Sea is not necessarily the interest of the Philippines. The U.S. is interested in projecting power, controlling the region, controlling Asia. That's the whole reason we got involved in the Philippines in the first place. The Philippines just want to fish for some fish off of their coast.
Right, and there's reports that if you just go and talk to a lot of Filipinos, the average man on the street is not necessarily anti-American. I'm sure there's a lot of mixed feelings because we have a president there that comes across as being very anti-American. But I found it interesting that not only did he say, I'm giving up through with the United States. I'm going to China. He went to China, but he also throws in, I'll go to Putin too if I need some help. And that of course, could be, significant. He may, seriously think that. In a way, it could be, just the emphasis on the fact that when America loses its influence and the dollar continues to slip away as the reserve currency, that here we have China and maybe the Philippines think, but maybe China and Russia and India will have another reserve currency that will, challenge the dollar. You say, well, it still doesn't make much sense because he should be our friend and China's friend. But there's a lot of smoldering resentment against the United States, the foreign policy. So, yes, if somebody's benefiting by our largesse and our bases and they have jobs, but also a lot of people just get really tired of it, that we're always telling them what to do. And it's not an official loss of sovereignty, but in many ways it's a loss of their decision making. And I think part of the problem, not only is our aggressiveness, that's a problem, but I think it's also a problem is what countries like the Philippines, what they do. If they understand true libertarian philosophy and sound money, they could have taken the Philippines after they finally got their independence from the United States, turn it into a huge Hong Kong. Just invite people in. Say, come here, put your business here. We're going to keep taxes low and we're going to deal with sound money and we're going to honor and respect property rights. But that never seems to happen. But I don't think it's so much a political decision. I think it's an economic decision of ignorance. I don't think they realize what could be done, if they accepted a different form of government. So they mess up. There's a lot of poor people. The fishermen want to make a living, and then we get into these squabbles, and then they have to depend on the United States. Now the argument is we're already there. I mean, because of the anti-terrorism program, the Filipinos know in the southern part of the Philippines they have threat from Islamic terrorists. At least that is what is said. So there's a motivation there to probably hang on to ties with the United States.
You mentioned earlier, some frustration with America, the man on the street in the Philippines. And as you wrote in your column, while the Americans are obsessing over the election, things are happening overseas. The media hasn't covered it very much, but there was a pretty significant protest in the Philippines in the last couple of days. Violent, anti-American protest. The police, actually, there's the dramatic video, the police rammed the protesters with their police car. I think they severely hurt some people. So there was some very violent demonstration against the U.S. putting troops there. And this goes back to the 2014 Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. The bases were closed in 92, but then we went ahead under Benigno Aquino in 14 and signed this agreement, and it allows three things to happen. Joint training missions between the U.S. and the Philippines, military training missions, multiple bases for U.S. forces. That'll be 5 U.S. military bases, where we only had 2, 5 bases, and 3 pre-positioned U.S. military equipment on the Philippine island. And I think you can understand why people would get upset, because if the U.S., I would say aggressive foreign policy in the region does continue and does explode, there's a huge target painted on the back of the Philippines for a Chinese missile.
In many ways, we're still trying to figure things out from the consequence of decisions made by our government in 1898. I think of 1898 is that the manifest destiny that we Americans endorsed at that time had gone offshore. Because although we were involved in Central America and different places, to take over a country and own it and run it, it was always, we made the country bigger because it was manifestly our duty to expand and get rid of the Indians and get rid of the Mexicans and all this, and we made a big country. So, but this was the opening salvo, I think, to the 20th century interventionism of foreign policy, which was more blatant and more direct, and we will take over and we will be the kingmakers. And here we are, 100 years plus since then, and we're still trying to figure this out. What should the relationship be? And it just seems so strange that people can't say, well, maybe we should have a completely different relationship. That's why I certainly agree that we don't need this bilateral agreement. I think they're all very, very dangerous. I think we should defend this country and be strong and powerful. And instead of guaranteeing that we'll take care of them or guaranteeing that we will help them in any way whatsoever, or we try to mold them and change them, it can be done, in voluntarism. If we did a good job here, maybe they would emulate us. As a matter of fact, the drug issue might be a good issue to say that. I wonder if they're emulating us in any way. But of course, what are they going to say? Oh no, they're killing people, over there in the Philippines.
Yeah. Good thing we're not doing any kind of drug war here.
Right.
But we both noticed an article by Doug Bandow, who we've known, and he's spoken at some of the lunches in the old days. And he made a good point in a way which is that okay, let's just take what Duterte said, and let's use it to our advantage and use it to back away from, as you say, this bilateral mutual defense treaty, and to back away to some of our commitments to the Philippines and sort of rework it in a way that's actually mutually beneficial.
Well, that would be good, but that's so logical. I'm not expecting that to happen. But it'll be interesting to see, I think, how the media treats this, or whether they ever talk about it. Maybe they won't talk about it, and there won't be any shouting between the Philippines and our president that after the campaign's over, they might not even bring this up. But obviously, it's smoldering. It is there. We talked about the South China Sea several times already, thinking that our policy there of immediately sending ships over there. So that in itself, must aggravate a lot of people. Oh, the Americans are coming. The Americans are coming. Look at this aircraft carrier, and we better do what they tell us, or they might shoot us all, and start bombing us.
Yeah, I think this caught Washington off guard when he said this in China. I think that may be enough to put a price on his head. I don't think they take kindly to people speaking out of turn. This goes back to the Dulles brothers. They don't like independent-minded people in that region.
And even in the Middle East, you cannot take the position, I want to be friends with both sides. No matter where it is, you have to be. How about what our president said during the Iraqi war? You're either with us or against us. You didn't have any choice. And if you weren't with us, we're going to come and get you. Yeah. I mean, that was about as aggressive and blatant as we've ever had. And I don't think foreigners forget about that attitude. So attitudes are pretty darn important. The way we throw our weight around and then have bad policies, and who knows where this is going to lead to.
Doug makes a good point just in closing. He kind of a good quip. He said that America collects allies like other people collect Facebook friends. That's not a good foreign policy.
There you go. Well, anyway, I consider this a very important issue, although I don't believe we're on the verge of a major war breaking out there. But wars break out after periods of time of misunderstandings and people pushing one side against another and can't anticipate how each country is going to react. And like Daniel just pointed out, the president of the Philippines, he essentially might have caught our government off guard. So that is important. But I tell you what shouldn't catch us off guard is the failure of interventionism. This is an example of the lingering effects of the Spanish-American War, which was purely concocted. And at the time, we were expanding our empire. The initial big phase. China at the time, Hawaii at the time, Puerto Rico, Philippines, all of this, and we're still living with this, so it's not going to go away very soon. I think it's time that we really consider, non-interventionism as a foreign policy. Believe me, the whole world would be much safer and much more prosperous. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.
Hi there, welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Ray. Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte is in China on a state visit that could upend relations in the region and possibly throw a security challenge to Japan, which he is due to visit next. The visit promises to end years of estrangement between Beijing and Manila, but elevating China as a security partner at the expense of ties with Washington could also weaken the security relationship Japan relies on. So what positive outcomes can we expect from this visit? And what will be the ripple effects it will cause throughout the region? To answer these and other questions, joining me in the first half of the program is Martin Andana, President Duterte's communications officer. But in the second half, when we come back, I shall talk to Anna Tangen, an author and columnist, and Zhong Hotao from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Rajiv Ranjan Chaturvedi, a researcher at the National University of Singapore, will also join us via telephone. But before we get started, let's look at this.
Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte called his trip to China this week a turning point in bilateral ties.
Well, in one word, I would say it's a defining moment of my presidency. To open frontiers of friendship and cooperation, enhancement when old relationship between our two countries.
What I want to say is that China also attaches great importance to this visit. We are ready to show our friendship to the Philippine people. We also will reach out for cooperation. We believe President Duterte's visit will be successful. It will not only restore our bilateral relationship, but also create a better future for collaboration.
Based on the makeup of his delegation, it seems like economic cooperation is on top of his agenda. He's coming with at least 200 members of business elite to pave the way for what he calls a new commercial alliance. Among the areas expected to be of high priority are financing for Philippine businesses, farm exports, major infrastructure investment, and tourism. China is the Philippines' important export destination.
Maybe I can sign a treaty somewhere. Partnerships in the enhancement of the agriculture. Now, if it is, if you find it in your heart to give it to us also, well, we'll be thankful. The only hope of the Philippines economically, I'd be frank with you, it's China.
The Philippine president said his country is used to being limited by its Western allies when it comes to foreign affairs, but it's going to seek what is best for his country in diplomacy, and improving relations with China is an important step towards that.
Welcome to Dialogue, sir.
Thank you so much for having me, Young Ray.
First of all, I'd like to have your assessment about the general relationship between Manila and Beijing.
Since President Duterte came into power last June 30 and swore in as the president of the Philippines, the foreign policy has changed from then on. Now our country is treading an independent foreign policy, and one of which is to open its doors to more countries for investments. And these countries may not be the countries that are favorable for the Western world. And that's one. That's China, there's Russia, and other countries as well are open to invest in the Philippines and establish strong bilateral ties.
A foreign policy of independence. What does that mean?
An independent foreign policy means that a country is determining its own policy in running its foreign affairs. It means a country is independent from all of the influences coming from the left and the right, from the east, from the west. It means that a country is serving the national interest and the interest of the entire population, but not the interest of former colonial masters.
Everybody would believe that President Duterte would definitely raise the issue of the South China Sea. However, your Foreign Secretary, Mr. Prefecto Yasai, said on Monday that President Duterte would not raise the Philippines' claim in the South China Sea in his bilateral meeting with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. What's going to happen between the two heads of state?
President Duterte has time and again reiterated that he will take it in a soft landing manner when it comes to the West Philippine Sea or the South China Sea. There are more issues and there are more concerns that should be raised, and there are more opportunities lying ahead that should be taken into consideration when it comes to bilateral ties between one country to the other. And our president would like to explore the other options and the other opportunities that lie in the table of a bilateral relationship.
Ahead of former President Aquino III, bilateral relationships had been very good, and the ties reached its historical high during the administration of Arroyo. And allegedly, due to domestic politics, the bilateral ties between Manila and Beijing seem to have been held hostage by partisan wrangling inside Manila. Do you think this will quickly change? Because President Duterte says that he would do whatever he can to quickly restore the mutual trust and bilateral relationship.
Young Ray, the reality is China is the second largest economy in the world, and we are situated in a location that is just a stone's throw away from China. Our president is pragmatic, and he believes that a strong neighborhood ties is very important for our country to progress. And that is the entire reason why the president is here right now in China for a state visit.
But lurking behind the scenario is the United States, which allegedly engineered the whole event about the July the 12th ruling, which was obviously not in favor of China. And some in your country warned President Duterte that he should not give up too much, otherwise he would face the danger of being impeached. Now, are you clearly aware of the vicissitudes and the challenges lying ahead for President Duterte?
President Duterte already said, yes, he could be impeached. But then again, we are not severing our ties from our relationships with the Western world. And we are also not dropping the decision of the Permanent Court of Arbitration. What we are only saying is that we are opening our doors to more possibilities of strengthening our relationship with other countries, just like China.
Let's come back to examine some of the specific issues in such areas like infrastructure, where remarkable progress is likely to be made between the two sides, and China stands ready to help. Also, the imminent issue for President Duterte on his political agenda after taking the highest office in your country is how to fight drug trafficking and drug addicts. What can China do to assist the new administration in tackling this issue of the greatest concern?
Thank you for asking me that question. Right from the onset, China's already been there. China already offered to build rehabilitation centers, and there is one already that is being built and is about to be finished. It's more than $1 billion pesos worth of investment or aid from Chinese.
Excuse me, let's clarify this project. Is it unconditional and free, just the gift from the Chinese government?
It's an aid, it's a gift to build. You know, Young Ray.
Without attaching any preconditions about human rights?
Without any strings attached. You know, you see, when you are friends, you do not treat a friend negatively. If your friend is having a hard time, you do not berate, you do not vilify a friend. And China has been acting more than a friend. You've been acting like a brother. That is why our president is here right now in China to visit the president and the people of China and to strengthen our bilateral ties. So China has already been helping even before we asked for help.
As a result of the very powerful crackdown upon drug addicts, the approval rating for President Duterte has reached up to 76% at this moment. It seems he enjoys overwhelming popularity at home. What does that mean for him?
It means that the Western world and other countries have a sort of a disconnect in understanding what the people really need in our country. There's a certain disconnect in understanding the context of our drug war. There are about almost 4 million drug dependents in our country, people who take crystal meth or shabu. And it is very important for our president to save the lives of the next generation. And if it does not take these draconian measures, then our country will just go to the dogs in a few years.
But the Philippines is a democracy. However, many of the things that President Duterte has done so far seems to be against the traditional understanding about respecting rule of law from the American perspective. Will that seriously endanger the 65-year-old treaty mutual alliance between the two countries, the Philippines and the United States?
My question to you, Young Ray, is that you're talking about rule of law. How can you apply the rule of law if you have a weak rule of law? When people do not follow the laws of the land, when narco-politics is already abound, what do you do? And which problem do you solve? Do you solve the problem of the thousands of drug lords? Or do you solve the problem of the 4 million drug addicts? Not counting the members of the families who are affected by the drug menace.
Let's take a closer look at President Duterte himself. We would love to know more about his charisma and popularity. Why does he come across as such a tough guy down the history of the Philippines? And we would like to know more about why he has risen to such a point of prominence at such a critical moment of history.
Because President Duterte understands the need and the needs of the people in the Philippines. Because President Duterte is the only person who was able to use the local powers in order for law and order to be present in a city. Because he's the only mayor who was able to lift a city that is in the middle of insurgency from one of the most infamous cities for murders and insurgency to a vibrant city, peaceful, and a very safe city for the entire country, for the entire Davao. And people saw through it, that we need a person who can implement the rule of law, who can give peace and order in the land, a president who understands the left, the CPP, NPA, NDF, and the moral rebels, and the president also who has compassion for the poor and who understands the needs of the poor by implementing these poverty alleviation programs.
Last question. Next year, the Philippines will assume the rotating presidency of ASEAN, one of the most successful regional bloc. Given the current discrepancies and disputes within and between member states of this 10-member bloc, how would Manila exercise effective leadership in putting them together and building consensus?
President Duterte has already started his rounds around ASEAN. The president went to Laos to accept the chairmanship of ASEAN 2017, and then he proceeded to Jakarta, then after that Vietnam, and just recently in Brunei, and now in China. And that only means that the president is also getting a feel of the other state leaders. It is very important for me to say this, Young Ray, that the momentum of President Duterte's long march for the country's relevance in the international stage is unstoppable. And there's no stopping our president from opening our doors to China and to the other countries who are interested in working with us for a better region and for a better future for our country.
Thank you very much for the rosy picture and the point of no return. Thank you. I do appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Welcome back. In the second half of the show, we are joined in the studio by Anna Tangen, an author and a columnist, and Zhong Hotao from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. We shall also cross over to Rajiv Ranjan Chaturvedi, a researcher at the National University of Singapore, via telephone. Welcome to our discussion here. I've been able to talk to communications officer of President Duterte in the first half. He said a lot of nice things about this state visit, the first of its kind since Aquino III brought his presidency to an end through the election. Now, first of all, Duterte's visit came on the heels of a not very good relationship, I would say a stormy relationship with Manila, exacerbated in part by the previous administration taking China to the arbitration in The Hague over the South China Sea. How do you estimate the impact of this relationship, particularly after the state visit?
I think this great visit will bring a great momentum to the China and Philippine relationship from both political and economic and people-to-people exchange. President Duterte is coming to our country, and I think maybe in future President Xi Jinping will also visit Philippines. As for economic aspect, I think the two sides will cooperate quite strongly in future, especially maybe Chinese mainland. China will invest some infrastructure in Philippines, for example, railway and some other great projects. As for people-to-people contacts, I think more and more Chinese mainland coming people will travel to Philippines, and that will bring a great interest for the tourist industry in Philippines.
Now that President Duterte has offered an olive branch, and it's the same the other way around, China has helped donate a drug rehabilitation center. That's a very friendly gesture, in sharp contrast with the American criticism about human rights violations. So what do you think of the honeymoon between the two countries at this moment?
Well, I think there are three main points. First off, Duterte has been bothered by the fact that his country has been it's been plagued by crime. And he was able to take care of that in his cities. People are complaining about the methods that he used or were used. And the issue, though, is that he's changing this idea of what good governance means. It has always been, well, if you have a voting box and you have a stock market, you should be happy, and that's all that is necessary. He's saying, no, it's more than that. You have to have jobs, you have to have safe streets, you have to have basic government services before freedom can be meaningful. Second, TPP is on the wane. It's very unlikely that it's going to pass, regardless of who becomes president. And with that, the Philippines, I think, is looking outward towards what its future could be. Obviously, China could figure very heavily in that because of the proximity. The third is that the Philippines has been long, in some cases, monopolized by its very strong relation with the U.S. In the end, it's not just China he's talking to, he's also talking to Russia. And this is a big balancing game between the major powers in the area, but it does leave Japan kind of in a quandary, because this encirclement idea that has been very much affecting China is now looking to become a lot softer.
Let me cross over to Rajiv Ranjan Chaturvedi, a senior researcher with the National University of Singapore, for his comments on the latest development. Hello, Rajiv.
Yeah.
Duterte has had an uneasy relationship with the United States. He says he's charting an independent foreign policy, no longer dependent on the U.S. However, American officers say, well, wait a minute, relationship and cooperation between the two countries will remain the same. What do you make of the conflicting allegations here?
I think this statement should be read with a pinch of salt, because foreign policy doesn't change overnight. That is because some 3/4 of Philippines military equipment comes from the United States. Also, many of the most significant policy changes announced by the President Duterte are his own alone initiative without any prior consultation. So it's extremely personalized and unprocessed approach. I think implementing those announcements will be not so easy, difficult. So I don't see that his approach to improve relationship with China will be seen in a zero-sum game. It's win-win situation approach should we take, where there will be some changes in relationship with the U.S., but simultaneously he is also extending, as you rightly mentioned, olive branch to China to strengthen the relationship.
Thank you very much. That's Rajiv, a senior researcher with the National University of Singapore. Welcome back to the studio discussion here. Anna, this scholar from Singapore says what President Duterte said actually only represents his personal opinions without prior consultation with the think tank or his policy advisors. What do you think of this observation from Singapore, one important player in ASEAN?
Well, I think there are practical considerations in terms of military equipment. But if you start looking at the economics, the fact is the economics are going to be pushing the situation, and the Philippines is in dire need of investment, and it has not been coming in the kind of quantity that is necessary for the Philippines to go forward. With almost 100 million population, they have to start looking internally to solve their problems, and they are looking to balance how they do it. And right now, China is a huge economic factor, and I think this is Duterte's thing. So this idea that he's acting alone, I think should be also taken with a grain of salt. He represents a very, very strong popular opinion that the Philippines needs to be providing for the Philippines itself.
Giving the powerful effect on the current war on drugs and crimes in the streets of Philippines, his approval rating stands at 75% at this moment. Now, given this mandate in his hands, do you think he will greatly improve relationship with the PRC to the dismay of Washington? For example, China has given Manila a drug rehabilitation center unconditionally. Will that pave the way and lay the groundwork?
I think Philippines will keep a balanced strategy between between Beijing and Washington. As for economic aspect, the Philippines will try to set a good relationship with China, and maybe that will do a great favor or do great goods for the Philippine economic growth. As for military aspect, Philippines will continue to consolidate its allies with Washington. I think that in two hands strategy.
Let's listen to what President Duterte says at the press conference. Let's listen to his soundbite.
We will not stop until the last drug lord, the last financier, and the last pusher have surrendered or put behind bars. Or below the ground, if they so wish.
Well, he was given a standing ovation in the parliament at a press conference and its policy briefing. What do you make of the charisma and the populism that he came along with?
I think the drug is quite popular in Philippines, and President Duterte trying to fighting against the drug is try to attract those popular, most common people's idea, and they are willing. This president could work very hard on this aspect to set a good condition, set a good atmosphere for this country, especially for its economic development. And another point is President Duterte is trying to fighting against the crime. That is really very important for the development of this country.
You have to look at this as a plague. Yeah. They have a methamphetamine problem. Once these people get on this, they cannot, the only thing they can do is steal to support their habit. They will take money from their grandparents, anybody to get it, because they are not in control of themselves. This leads to crime. So if you're in a situation like in Manila, where you have these drug addicts and their pushers and their suppliers all around you, it is literally like living in hell. This is not the kind of situation. And he has, in his first 100 days, taken more action than any other presidency in their first 100 days.
Excuse me,
it's something noticeable.
Wondering why we had the anarchical slide, chaotic situation in the previous administration. Was it because of the corruption, poor governance? Why? The Philippines used to be a strong economy in Southeast Asia.
Okay, but let's put this in perspective. What happened is you had the downturn, and then all of a sudden, the Philippines has been growing at 5% under Benigno Aquino. But if you talk to the normal people, what they'll tell you is they say, we read every day about the progress the Philippines is making, but they look in their pocket and it's the same. They've received no benefits. So there's this real strong feeling that things have to change, that the economic prosperity of the Philippines cannot just be shared among the elite. And he's brought in a completely new and different cast of people. Before, regardless of who was in power, the same people would come in to fill the cabinet posts. It would be the same names, the same families, etc. Now there's a completely different. This has detractions in the sense that you have people who are not as used to handling things on a national front because they're coming more from the provincial side. But it has really shaken up the power structure in the Philippines. There's definitely a new sheriff in town, and he is taking what a lot of people feel is the required steps. Now, from the European and U.S. view, there are concerns about human rights abuses, etc. But he's I think I can understand his frustration. He says, you criticize me, but what are you offering in terms of a solution?
Up next, let's listen to yet another soundbite by this president.
So I'm serving notice now to the Americans and to those who rally. I will maintain the military alliance because there is an RPUS pact which our country signed in the early 50s. But I will establish new alliances for trade and commerce. And you are scheduled to hold war games again, which China does not want. I would serve notice to you now that this will be the last military exercise. Jointly, Philippines, US, the last one.
I'm not sure if this will be the last military exercise jointly between the two countries. How will the change to military relationship impact on the US strategy in the Asia-Pacific? Hotel.
The United States is trying to plan as the so-called pivot to Asia strategy, and Philippines is a very great, important chess piece in this strategy. If the Philippines do not cooperate very well with the United States, then the United States could not well implement the so-called rebalancing strategy. And the most important one is if Philippines refuses the United States to implement the P-8 spy plan in Philippines, then maybe the United States will not able to spy the South China Sea.
We have Guam. It's not a problem. And we can use bases in Japan for that. I think the real issue here is that he's taking away the irritant for China. But the fact is, under Aquino, there was an agreement to open up 5 bases where the U.S. military can actively train, store, and use. So he has not addressed that. So what I think he's doing is, as he said, he's balancing. He's saying, yes, we still have our military alliances, but I am free to pursue the economic benefits that the Philippines needs.
The last question is, President Duterte has made it very clear that he will not raise the issue of July the 12th arbitration, the ruling. Is he serious? I mean, what does that mean for the current state visit?
I hope he is serious, and the two sides' relationship should focus on economic cooperation and on the sides. We should not just focus on this arbitration. As for this
next question is: will the Chinese authorities make any serious compromise on the issue of sovereignty? For example, one thing may give some margin for flexibility, such as fishing rights.
Yes.
What do you think?
There's a strong case to be made that they will continue to allow Filipino fishermen to fish